These days, it seems like everything's getting more expensive. So, if you want to start a new hobby like doll making, or even turn it into a business to help pay the bills, buying everything you need to get started can feel overwhelming. There are so many crafty tools, handy gadgets, and different materials that people will tell you absolutely need. But they're all a bit pricey, and you told yourself you wouldn't pour money into another hobby only to quit it in 6 months. So, what do? Well, don't worry. Today, I'm going to give you 7 tips for doll making on a budget. Welcome to the Divergent Doll Maker podcast. When I first started making dolls, I just graduated from university and moved to a new area. I was recovering from burnout and I didn't have a job, so I didn't have a lot of spare cash to pour into a new hobby or business. When you're in that situation, you feel stuck. Being creative can be so good for your mental health, and I know it was instrumental in my recovery. But how do you even get started when there's no money in the bank to buy materials? My first tip is start with what you have and upgrade equipment when you can afford it. The most expensive item you're likely to need when you're getting started with doll making is a sewing machine. This can be a big investment, but it doesn't have to be. When I started, I already had an old basic Janome sewing machine that had been sitting gathering dust in the back of a cupboard for years. So I cleaned it up a bit and treated it to a little bit of oil, and it was good enough for simple sewing. It didn't have any fancy stitches, but as long as you have a straight stitch and a zigzag, that's pretty much all you need. If you don't already have a sewing machine, it's worth asking friends and family if they have one you could borrow. You'd be surprised how many people have sewing machines hidden away that they're not using. Whatever you do, don't go into debt to buy an all-singing, all-dancing digital sewing machine with 200 programmable stitches. You don't need it. When you do start making a little bit of income from selling dolls or any other crafts you make, you'll have a much better idea of the exact features you need. Then you can upgrade and get the right machine for you. The great thing about older, more basic sewing machines is that there's not really too much to go wrong with them, and they're generally quite easy to repair. A quick YouTube search will tell you how to fix most common problems, so you can often find a used machine at a bargain price in a charity shop or on Facebook Marketplace, for example, and it'll still have years of life left in it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that all you need is an old sewing machine and you'll become a millionaire. I'm certainly not. But it did allow me to get out of the rut I was in and follow my lifelong dream of starting my own business, which has kept a roof over my head for the last few years. I did upgrade my old sewing machine after a few months to another fairly basic Janome machine that had a few more stitches on it that I could use for edging seams. I'm still using that one 13 years later. My original machine still does work, and I keep that one as a backup, just in case. When it comes to some of the other things you need for sewing, like fabrics and haberdashery, you might think you need to spend a fortune on fat quarters of designer fabrics and reels of lace from high street art and craft shops, but you'd be surprised how often you can find unique, high-quality materials by giving old, used items a new life, which brings me to my next tip. One crafter's trash is another's treasure, and there are a few places you can go digging. Charity shops or thrift shops, depending on where you are in the world, can be gold mines. The trick is to go in with a creative eye and look for potential. When I started out, charity shops were my favourite places to find unusual fabrics. Men's cotton shirts are often really good. You can find some lovely quality fabric with tiny prints that are the perfect scale for doll clothes. Sometimes you can find some absolute bargains, like bags of lovely vintage beads and buttons or offcuts of ribbon that would cost way more in a sewing shop. Something like a dress with a broken fastener or a torn seam might be marked down because of the damage, but if the fabric's good, you could get 10 or even 20 doll dresses out of it. I think my all-time favourite charity shop find was a teal blue embroidered satin dress. It had a bit of damage, so it only cost me a couple of pounds, and I used every last scrap of fabric from it for doll clothes. Here in the UK, the season for car boot sales is just getting started too. I don't know if this is just a British phenomenon, but car boot sales are basically where farmers open up a large field on Sunday mornings all throughout the summer, and people pay a small fee to park up and sell their unwanted items from their cars or vans. There can be hundreds of vehicles parked in rows, all with totally random things for sale. These are great places to find art and craft materials. Generally, most items are sold really cheap, and people love to have a haggle. You can find some really weird and wonderful stuff, and occasionally you'll find something really special. If you have no budget at all, it's worth checking out apps like FreeCycle or Nextdoor, where people around your local area can list their unwanted items for free. If you're prepared to put a bit of time and effort into it and do a little bit of searching, you may be able to find everything you need to start without spending any money at all. Now, once you've got the basic equipment you need, and maybe a few bits of fabric that were just crying out to be turned into doll dresses, you're going to want to put them to the best use you possibly can. It might sound obvious, but if you don't have a lot to spend on doll making, it makes sense to stretch out the materials you have as much as possible. One of the easiest ways to do this is with my third tip, which is downsize your dolls. My earliest dolls were about 15 inches tall. I think I thought people wouldn't value them if I made them any smaller, and I wouldn't be able to charge enough to justify making them. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Collectors value the time and skill that goes into a doll rather than how big it is. So little intricate details are more appealing to buyers than a large size. If you keep your dolls small, there's very little waste. You can find uses for the tiniest scraps of fabric. Small dolls take up less shelf space, so it's easier for buyers to find a place for them. And they're also a lot easier to package and send out, which means you can even offer international shipping and widen the market you sell to. No matter what size dolls you make, nobody wants their work to look or feel cheap. And of course, you're going to want to make sure they're going to last for a long time. So as you gain experience, there'll be some materials you won't want to compromise on, which brings me to my next tip. Work out where you can use budget materials and buy quality where it makes the most difference. You don't have to buy the highest quality materials for everything. I think especially when you're getting started, you don't really know what's going to work for you. So budget materials can be good for trying out different styles and techniques. Over time though, you'll get to know where you can save money on materials and where it pays to buy better quality. For example, I don't buy the highest quality acrylic paints, mostly because I found student quality paints tend to be made with synthetic pigments. So they're vegan friendly, which is important to me personally. I mostly use System 3 acrylics, which work absolutely fine and last just as well as more expensive paints. One of the things I won't compromise on is upholstery thread for jointing and hand stitching. I've tried various brands over the years, but I found cheap thread to be a false economy as it breaks too easily and lowers the quality of the finished doll. Gutterman threads can seem pricey, but they're well worth the extra cost. I'll put some links in the show notes or in the description if you're watching on YouTube to some of the materials I like to use regularly. As you start getting into a creative flow with doll making, you'll have your list of non-negotiable materials that you want to keep stocked up, and it can start to get a little bit expensive if you're heading down to the craft shop every week for another bag of stuffing. This is where it might be worth seeing if you can buy in bulk. It can feel like a big outlay at first, but if you're starting to make a little bit of money from selling your work, it can work out a lot cheaper to buy 5 kilos of stuffing online than to keep buying 500-gram packs. If you have a friend or two who also make things, you could even team up and order a bulk pack of stuffing or a ream of fabric and split the cost between you. The only caveat I'd add here is to be sure it's something you like and you're going to want to keep using. I've made the mistake more than once where I've ordered a large quantity of something only to realise it's not suitable for my needs. I once ordered a 7-kilo bag of polyester stuffing on eBay thinking I was getting an absolute bargain. Unfortunately, when it arrived, I realised it was recycled and it was all lumpy in a sort of dirty greyish colour, not good for doll making at all. It wasn't worth the cost or the effort to send it back. So I put that one down to experience and listed it for free on Facebook Marketplace. So at least someone else got some use out of it. At the other end of the scale, sometimes it makes more sense to buy materials in small quantities. When it comes to art materials like pastels or coloured pencils, it can be tempting to want to buy the full set of colours. But are you really going to use 15 shades of blue right away? Honestly? You can often find online art suppliers who'll sell single pencils separately, so you could buy 2 or 3 colours to start with and build up a collection of colours over time as you need them. The same goes for things like ribbon and lace trim. It may seem cheaper to buy a full reel, but how much are you actually going to use? I still have reels of ribbon in my stash that I bought 5 years ago. When you're making something tiny like an art doll, a little goes a very long way. So unless you get a really good deal, buy ribbon and lace by the meter and save the bulk buying for things you know you're going to get through quickly. Professional quality materials are nice once you can afford them. But my next tip, particularly for beginners, would be don't let the lack of materials be a barrier to getting started in doll making. When we were kids at school, anything from dried pasta to cardboard boxes could be turned into a work of art. As we grow up, we get conditioned to believe that it's only real art if we paid a lot of money to create it. That's just not true. You need to let go of that belief and start looking at the things we throw out in a new way. Get creative with what you have lying around at home. Torn bed sheets or outgrown children's clothes can make awesome doll making fabrics. Can't get hold of stuffing? Try experimenting with rice or sawdust, or maybe the stuffing from an old flattened pillow. Doll hair can be made from scraps of yarn or even unravelled knitwear. Want to try making clay dolls? Why not have a go at making your own paper clay or paper mache? I've used all sorts of found and recycled materials in my dolls over the years. One of my favourites was some witch's brooms I made from twigs I found in the back garden. Dried thyme twigs worked great for the bristles and they smelled really good too. At one point, I was struggling to find the right shape for a top hat, narrow at the base and a bit wider at the top, until I spotted a toothpaste tube lid, which was exactly the right size and shape. Covered in felt and fitted to a cardboard brim, with a few added decorations, it worked perfectly. Thrifted, upcycled and homemade materials can give your dolls a totally unique look that makes them unmistakably yours. If you use fabric from a 20-year-old dress you found in a charity shop, a ball of discontinued yarn you found in the attic, and some vintage buttons from your granny's sewing box, it's unlikely anyone else will be using the same combination. Pair those with a small amount of high pigment pastel, some good quality thread and a little bit of creativity, and you'll have something really special. Thanks so much for watching. If you're just getting started with doll making and you need a little bit of help to find a unique creative style that sets you apart from everyone else, check out this episode next, and I'll see you next time. Bye!